morning, sports fans, again for this edition of the Baer Faxt Live. It's sponsored by Manuela, New York, by Art Farm. Now, it's a restaurant and a bar in the heart of Soho, not the Soho you used to live in. Like,
I never lived in the heart of Soho.
The heart of you. I don't think you ever could even get a passport to Soho, but it has the best seasonal produce, the best art at this restaurant. So, for more information about the restaurant, of course, go to Manuela-NYC. The dash is important.com. So
I'm on my way.
You're on your way from Basel. We're here with Kenny Schachter. Kenny, you rarely have anything to say, but we thought we'd do you a solid by bringing you in. So tell us in like 10,000 words or less what you made of Art Basel so far. We'll start with that one.
The fact is, no one in my family listens to me anymore, so I take any chance for a captive audience and seize the moment to speak.
Everybody else listens to you except your family, right?
Correct. Well,
okay.
Let's not push it. Okay, so, if I read one more article about the end of the art market, young people don't want to collect art anymore. On and on, doomsayers, the malaise, the pall cast over the art world. I'm going to puke.
Why do you think they're saying that?
But can I tell you, I have been here, I landed in Zurich from London on a week ago, more or less. They're saying it just for clickbait, just to make a story, to make a twist. Okay, we're in exceedingly difficult and uncertain social, political, and economic times with a lot of tumult. We can't say it's worse than it's ever been, because in World War II, there were tens of millions of people that died alone. We're not quite there yet, but I wouldn't rule anything out at this juncture. But I was thinking just on the way here from my hotel, 27 miles from here, and foot, art is resilient. I'm making an artwork to characterize what I saw yesterday at the fair and at the Basel Social Club, which I'd like to mention. And I was just thinking of like New York City style cockroaches. They're gigantic, they're resilient, and they'll withstand a nuclear conflagration. People love art. People have loved art since it came off the wall of caves, and even before when they put it on the wall of caves. People will always love art. You hear this rhetoric about experiences. Kids want experiences and collect. I've never met a single person in my life that wanted to collect an experience. I don't even know what an experience is. I went to the fair yesterday, the hair standing up on my arm incessantly, seeing the most extraordinary works of art. I spent 4 or 5 hours till I couldn't walk anymore, and I saw one floor. And then I went to the Basel Social Club, which had this kind of visceral energy, palpable, which was extraordinary, discovery. Eyes open wide, curiosity, and seeing great art, great people, and there's community, and people will always love art. I think that's it for today's rant.
First rant, well.
Sermon. I love art. Art is...
Didn't we learn something during the lockdown of COVID when in March 2020, we thought, wow, we're all going to be out of business this year. It's going to go to zero. And it was a huge year. Now, that was the experience of being home and being bored, but then it followed up with another mini boom with, oh my God, I can go someplace. And that did so. It's not like people don't want to go or people don't want to buy.
Okay, so like what happened in COVID was that there was an explosion in online art sales where when Sotheby's or Christie's or Phillips or Bonhams or Heritage or any other auction house that broadcast auctions, all you see is an auctioneer and specialists on the phone. And they were getting 2 million viewers, like it was a spectator sport, just watching. You don't even see someone's hand go up in the audience, whether they're an advisor or a dealer or even a collector when they exist. They exist. And the fact is that it's the same story, the resiliency of, sure, I always say when you walk through the fair, you see some sullen people. It looks like a Manet painting of despair or a Lautrec or a Van Gogh. There's always a bell's curve of people succeeding wildly and people less so. The fact is, okay, so now the bell's getting a little bit smaller. So we're in a market that's in a state of contraction. Nevertheless, I met a few dealers yesterday. I went to a dinner for Esther Schipper last night, and it was like 200 people. And she said she did exceedingly well against her expectations. And
I started getting press releases all like within 5 minutes, and by like 4 o'clock, Werner reported 68 sales. It's like,
okay,
now,
wait, I have a
regardless
footnote to that.
of
The
things
veracity.
regardless of how many of those were done beforehand, 68 was still a big number.
Yes. The fact
That's
is,
one per sales director. Almost.
now you're getting me excited before the coffee is even kicked in. When you talk about fake news and this kind of like desecration of news media and how the world is kind of rife with lies and untruths in politics and in the reportage of the news, the art world embraces fake news. So I've written about some David's pre-sales before, with all due respect. I deeply admire him.
Subscriber number 1 to the Baer Faxt.
We love Josh Baer. Josh Baer has a new restaurant and a podcast and an online enterprise and a great dealer and a great heritage from his family. Nevertheless, dealers don't tell the truth, especially about art fair performance. When I used to do art fairs, when I was struggling to be an artist and a writer, I may have exaggerated, hyperbolized creatively the performance of a given booth. I remember not selling a single thing at a design fair that I did with Zaha Hadid. And I said things were going cheerful. You don't
ever read anybody saying, man,
Exactly.
we had a bad day.
It was
they either,
miserable.
Everything's fine, or they don't send out the press release. I want to see a press release someday that says, day 1, 0 sales, not so much
I was
traffic.
mortified.
But
I got a bottle of
but
whiskey.
expenses were the same.
More often than not, that's the situation. You have to be really on point, and you have to be really focused and determined to succeed in a difficult market, and we're clearly unequivocally in a difficult time. But yeah, maybe I was thinking on the way here again, I had a lot of time to ponder the situation, but I guess in the face of such unrest and unsettling times, you may as well go out with a new drawing or a painting on your wall, and then you can smile and have that relationship, which is one of the most extraordinary things I've ever experienced, standing in front of a work of art, writing about it, thinking about it, teaching about it, making something. And that distinguishes human beings from other species. We make art. We love art. It's a really it helps depression and anxiety. It's a beneficial thing in a world faced with really unpleasant things.
Follow up on that. In your role as an artist, when all this turmoil is going on in the world, what does that do to your art making? Does that make you lean in to all that's going on around you, or lean away, as some people might do, for a more spiritual, beautiful kind of thing, both for you and for what you see in other artists, and your kids are artists, and which way is that meter going?
That's a really interesting thought. But my fantasy is that I'd be able to make a flower painting or something beautiful, which, I study philosophy and I have more conceptual leanings. I've never been able to create something just purely aesthetically beautiful in the simplest of terms. I can't say that I'm making, I made a work in 21 about this.
1921?
Don't push it. I was hanging out with Larry Poons yesterday and on Monday, and then Michelangelo Pistoletto tomorrow, and I thought that's a good way to, that's the elixir of youth, is to surround yourself with people a little bit older than you. But yeah, I think art, the work you make is the work you make, and you can't really, like a chameleon, completely change colors. And I'm looking at technology and all of these machinations that make the world go round, but I'm not really, I made this piece on The Last Soldier when this iconic night vision goggle photograph was taken of the literally the last soldier to exit Afghanistan at the time. That's about as political as I've ever gotten. So I'm in between. I can't make beautiful work, I can't make political work, but I'm very cognizant of art and its role in our lives, which I think is ever increasingly more important and integral. And I just wish it was more, because I mean, there was one leader in an Eastern European country who made art and showed at the Baer Gallery.
Well, Putin makes art.
Next question, please.
So let's talk about what you just said about beauty. And I've noticed, and you've been very much a trailblazer always in new technologies. And it seems to me that artists are using AI to make things not beautiful, to work against AI's instruction. Like they're trying to control it. I'm thinking a little bit of Sally or Laurie Simmons to try to make it work against itself. Do you?
Well, you hear a lot of rhetoric about AI is going to destroy civilization and it's the end of creativity, whether it's writing, film, music, politics, fake news. I think in contravention to that, I think people are doing a damn good job of destroying civilization as opposed. I've never met a dishonest computer in my life. And it's funny because I love pigeonholing the Rubels for a quote in my articles. Usually Don is the fallback person for getting great insight into what's happening in the art world. This time I cornered Mira and she said, you know, I said, what about this whole issue with youth turning away from collecting and art? And she said, young people need art. All people need art. Art is life, except, and I was waiting for her to say something about the political situation globally. And then she said, except for technology. And I was like so disappointed, with all respect, because I deeply admired their program over the last 50 years and how they've integrated art into their other enterprises. But the fact is, art is a reflection of the social, political, economic, and technological times we live in. You can't turn a blind eye to technology or think it's good or bad. It is, it will be, and we're compelled as artists, writers, broadcasters to think about I know that you've been very supportive over the years, and the art world is really resistant to change, and they recoil from innovation, whether it was blockchain, NFTs, or online things, or Instagram, or these are paradigmatic shifts in the way. There hasn't been a major change in the art market for 200 years. And technology, we need the model of like Basel Art Fair and these art fairs where a gallery represents 25 artists and control, territorial, all of these issues. We need change. We need new ways, new models, and new ways to nurture new audiences.
We've been talking about that quite a bit, but in fact, it's the most conservative, prudish world you could ever imagine.
1000%.
That's completely resistant, with a few exceptions, to change. I mean, one of the things that I admire by Mark Glimcher is he's willing to try shit. And it's like, it sometimes is a NASCAR wreck. And we watch car racing for the wreck, so it's kind of entertaining.
You're sitting next to a wreck in real time.
I mean, you look up wreck in Wikipedia, under images, we see Kenny a little bit, but isn't there something to be said too that the desire for painting, which has been like the dominant art form for thousands of years, to be honest, that there's something like a special category in a sense for painting where I guess there's non-technology and the most difficult thing to do?
Well, I just made an exhibition in New York and I have a piece in this digital art fair, which I think the two most dynamic venues in this city, if you can call it a city, if I can say something.
The city Basel, the city New
York. In Basel, is the Digital Art Mile, this digital art fair, which people don't understand. There's one gallery in Paris, RCM, and they specialize in the history of digital art, of computer and code rendered works of art. And they have a booth comprised of art from the 1950s and 1960s of the most extraordinary works. It's like Sol LeWitt and Stanley Braun. They're just amazing conceptual efforts by artists at the very early and cutting edge era of deploying computers and technology for making art. So yeah, I mean, also, I made this exhibition in New York with paintings, oil paintings on canvas, the only company in the world that has this technology today. I made oil paintings on canvas based on digital imagery. So, and it's almost as if I was mocking like this Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction essay from Walter Benjamin in 1935, but it emulated to a T the hand, this kind of elusive hand of the artist. But anyway, I'm a bit of a prude somehow when it comes to living with art, even though I made my first computer animation in 1993. But I bought a Miriam Khan work on paper, pastel on paper yesterday. I always say the sign of a true art collector is someone that buys art in the face of a paucity of money. In other words, I'm broke again. But I bought a Miriam Khan, I think she's pushing 90, work on paper, and I'm so excited. And I just curated a Paul Tech show at Thomas Dane Gallery in London, and I bought a drawing of Paul Tech before I even got here in Zurich. And I had like buyer's remorse like shortly thereafter, and I was hemming and hawing. And then I just said like, oh, can I have a month, 2 months, 3 months, a few months to pay? Left it a little bit open-ended. But yeah, so people love paintings, back to your statement, because they're easy to hang, easy to move, easy to transport, and easy to send for sale.
And hard, painters will tell you, hard to do.
All art making, look, what you do is amazing. You've done this for decades, and you've done it extraordinarily well, and you're trailblazing. Everything is hard to do well. And yeah, you just do what you have a passion. Life is so short, I tell my students all the time, find your passion. We all have to compromise, but don't capitulate. And just try to find a way to make your love, your
I think
vocation.
Find your passion, you really learn that from being a parent, in a way, of seeing my daughter's 19, around age 15, she found her passion.
Wow, you're lucky.
For music. And you thinking at the time, well, that might be this month's passion because it's skateboarding, and then it's this, and then it's that. But she really found it, and that was, as a parent, the ideal thing you hope for. And you don't think of it on your own. As a young person, it's like, oh my God, where's my passion? Looking around, like, can I go to to Target to buy passion? But it is that kind of thing, and I think. I keep using words complex because I take it off the news.
You haven't said it yet.
Times people go to art if they have the luxury of not being in the target zone.
Yes, but for me, art is like, I just saw this. I just saw this poster. I did a lot of thinking on the way here, and I just saw. Let me see if I could find it.
Got you on the first thing.
Art is indulgence was a tagline advertising for the Basel Art Fair. Art is not an indulgence. Art is an imperative. And with passion,
If you're living in the South Sudan, it's not. But everything beyond that,
I would
agree.
Say
yes.
I don't agree. I think art is solace. Art is integral to life, like Mir said. And for me, I lost a child 6 years ago. I don't want to get emotional. But if it wasn't for art and my other children, I wouldn't be here talking to you. Art really, like I said, there's been all these medical studies, how medicinal it is. But I think I didn't know art galleries existed until I was 26. My mom died when I was 13. I'm not like violin playing. But it's made me the person I am today, and I have this. What I think is the most important thing besides passion is curiosity, a boundless curiosity to discover, to learn. I teach to learn, and I didn't know the art world existed because even though I was merely 17 miles from New York City, I could have been born on Mars because there were no galleries, and I never went to museums till I was in college. And I call myself idiot savant. I thought art went from the artist to the museum until I went to Warhol's estate sale in '88, and they were selling art, and it was an epiphany. and I'm
The
so
great
excited.
collector and dealer Ileana Sonnenbend said something, and by the way, she terrified me. Just as like,
A lot of dealers terrify me.
but she was the one who real. But she said my driving forces are curiosity, which you said, and greed, and it's like what a
She was-
powerful combination. And
That's amazing.
And just one doesn't really change the world or the person, but either one of them, greed.
I think she
And that was-
loved art. I would never associate the word greed with her, but I guess she was covetous for having art around her.
She wouldn't share her artists with other galleries.
Interesting.
And she wanted it all herself, and her ex-husband, Castelli, would work with everybody around the world to promote the artist without worrying about that he's giving up some of the sales. They were one floor apart on West Broadway, these two great galleries. You'd walk in and Leo would be sitting almost at the front desk, and Ileana would be a little less visible in the back in her sort of frou-frou thing. And she terrified me, but she in fact had the greatest collection because she was curious
And she was greedy.
and she was greedy. I mean,
What was the context of that quote? I have to go
It was,
find it. I'm going to steal it from you between us.
I think it was a New York Magazine article
Amazing.
about Neo Geo.
Amazing how
Right
she
at
gets
that time.
such short shrift in relationship to Leo Castelli, and she was one of the moving forces behind him and in front of him and on the side of him, and she's one of the great legendary art dealers of history.
Well, I'm sure you listened to our podcast with Barbara Castelli, who was quite interesting. I mean, talking about that sort of legacy and how to continue. I mean, it's worth going back to listen to her vantage point of that. I mean, they were quite close too, Leo and Ileana, at the same
Amazing.
kind of thing. So let's talk about the model a little bit more. We're talking about the galleries and the artwork being so conservative. There's also talk about should the model of the art fair change. How many art fairs did you do as a exhibitor? I think I did 11 or 12.
Well, I was always so unprofessional. I always say I can't sell drugs to a drug addict, so I was a disaster. And then, yes, I lied to Bloomberg and a few other press outlets about my performance.
Did you get thrown out of some fairs?
More than some.
You
I got
say, I'm
thrown
doing
out
this, and you went exactly that, and they like freaked out?
Forgot about that. The thing is, my team consists of me, and I barely get along with my team. And I'm not really one to comb over the minutiae and the small print. So I did Basel, where you were only meant to show 4 artists with art made over the past 2 to 3 years. I just failed to capture, to read that part. And I did a salon style of 20 artists with 50 works of art made from the 60s to the 70s. And I was unceremoniously thrown out for that. Then I did an...
During the show, or did they let you finish?
Now, well, can you imagine when they took the vetting crew around to the booths and went into my booth? And then I did an intervention, an architectural installation by Vito Acconci at another Basel fair when I was let back in. And then a few dealers, one of which may have been called Grinzinger, like they thought I was trying to like sabotage the fair and cut off passageway between one hall to the other when Vito did this wild thing. And I was on the phone with Vito Acconci, legendary, amazing, seminal conceptual artist, on the phone with him saying, you've got to rein it in. I'm trying to sell some art and people can't go from point A to point B. I was thrown out on that note. In Armory,
It's interesting to mention Acconci because the artists they're making like performance art as if it's a new thing, and I worked with Chris Burden, who was arguably
an amazing
one of the most important performance artists. So you've got the Felix Gonzalez Torres go-go dancer. It's for sale at $16 million.
No.
That's the price.
You get the guy with the impossibly
It's supposedly
fit body and the
been
little
owned
bikini.
by a Swiss
I
collector.
applied for that dancing job, but somehow I didn't make the cut.
There was a poll and you lost, but $16 million for a performance art piece. I mean, give them that takes guts to do that, spend to do it it's a Swiss collector supposedly.
Someone bought it.
Who's selling it? It's a resale.
Yeah, you could make any price.
16 million for performance art.
Oops, I'm always screwing up.
But people don't even, the new generation, they don't even know who Vito Conchi is.
No, but that's a long
My crew,
story.
they're all saying, "Who? What?" No, they're saying we
He
know.
masturbated under the floor. I mean, he gave me inspiration to when I had no career,
Sonoban guy.
when I had no hobby, no career, and I was kind of catatonic as a child who had a speech issue of stuttering. And then I found out that this man masturbated under a fake floor in Ileana Sonoban in 1972 in this legendary piece called Seedbed. I thought, maybe I found my calling. I like doing that. But he was someone who would try to, actually the work is so pertinent today because it was this notion of anti-materialism, of creating things that couldn't be subsumed into a voracious marketplace. But as far as fairs, this go round, I've been to the digital fair, which I'm exhibiting a piece in a curated section. Basel Social Club, I thought was one of the really great exhibitions I've seen and efforts, curatorial efforts. And it was just unconventional in every way. It was in this disused old bank. They utilized all this space, but also it had this, there weren't manned or womened booths. There was just art with barcodes interspersed throughout these unconventional spaces, hallways, stairways, a vault downstairs, the attic upstairs, and it was just wonderful. It was tired, it was exhausting and a little frustrating, but it was really well worth it. I didn't go to Lista because I think Lista started with that very sentiment of being in an old brewery.
It was the
And then
best things is they were sincere. There's not a lot of sincerity around the big fair in a certain way, but there's much more great art than you have the sincere with mediocre.
Not at the last list I went to last year, with all due respect, but I haven't felt the urge to even go this year because it went to a hall in the convention center and it's just status quo and it's just lost its kind of, the sense of just stumbling upon things in unforeseen places. And now it's Basel Social Club. They've been in 3 or 4 different locations to various degrees of success.
I would hope it's not here 10 years from now.
If they continue to innovate, then why not? But I think that we're going to see changes afoot and people looking at this model of the big mothership fair. I think that Basels will kind of cannibalize each other if there's too many. The one in Paris takes away a little of the oomph and the momentum from the one. I mean, in Basel, you stay in a hut that has no air conditioning, that looks clinical, like a mental institution, and it's $1,500 a night, which is just impossible. Or you can go to Paris, and in Basel there's few restaurant choices and less hotel choices. So now there's going to be a Basel in the Middle East, and there's one in the Miami one is sort of past its sell-by date. So there has to be changes, and art changes and can't be contained. So I'm hoping to see things that we can't even articulate now in the near future.
Well, I think that's a good place to end on. It's like still come to Basel, as opposed to how many Basels are there? Like,
well, I just say
5?
one thing before you conclude.
Of course.
Thank you very, 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 very much for having me. And I really appreciate your efforts and what you do. And yeah, this is the feeling. The hair stands up on my arm and I'm grateful to be here and I'm appreciative.
Well, once again, thanks to Manuela of New York by Art Farm for sponsoring this edition of the Baer Faxt Live. And thank you, Kenny. And don't forget, when you're in New York, you go to Soho, the old art place, and then come by their restaurant and their bar, and you get great art there. By the way, you like eating. Do you like to eat around great art? Maybe not.
I like to do everything around great art.
Okay, well that's the place.
If you want me to get into detail, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, well you get back to us on how that is. The food's great there.
Even
great.
poop.
Yep. It's like the Swiss know how to do some things really well. And so for more information on that, well, a couple of things you have to visit manuela-nyc.com, but also to follow Kenny. What's the best way to follow what you're doing?
I'm ubiquitous, as my kids would say, oversharing. But I always say it takes the same energy to say yes as it does to say no. And at this point, after the experiences I've had in my personal life, I love to help people and to facilitate opportunities for people and to teach. So if anyone has any questions or get in touch. It's not that difficult with me.
Yeah, don't call me, call him. Thank you, guys.
Just say hello and please. Thank you so much, all of you.